is LINDIE NAUGHTON. On this show, we're committed to encouraging open debate on a number of topics relating to health and with guests from all over Irish life. Excuse me, I'm getting mixed up here. At the moment, that debate is dominated by COVID, unfortunately. The material you will see on this show is not available on the mainstream media, so do show your support for what we're doing by pressing the share button on your screens now. Our topic today is sport and how it's been affected by the lockdowns over the last 9 months. That's international sport, national sport, and grassroots sports, all of which have been affected. Our guests are David McGill from Badminton Ireland, Frank Greally from the Daily Mile, who's the founding editor of the Irish, a director of Parkrun, which we all know and love at this stage, in Kerry, who will tell us how that has been going. We will start off with a pre-recorded interview with David McGill, who will explain to us how indoor sports have been particularly badly affected by what's been going on. Over the last 9 months, a lot of us have stayed sane by continuing to do our sports. But some sports have had it a lot harder than the rest of us, which are the indoor sports. And we have here this morning David McGill, who's the CEO of Badminton Ireland. And he's going to tell us exactly what was going on in badminton, which, as we know, is not just a sport that has produced Olympians, but which provides genuine and good recreational opportunities for players of all levels all over the country. So it's probably afternoon now. Good afternoon, David.
Good afternoon, Lindy. Thanks for having me.
Could you tell us what it was like, say, back in March when you first heard the news of this?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a very long time ago now when we're talking about March. But I was actually in England when it was starting to become apparent that we were going to see a lockdown in Ireland. I was at a badminton event over there. It was quite a large badminton event. They had to do a lot in terms of protocols to make that event happen. And we were starting to hear rumours that there was an announcement coming from government. So it was a bit, I suppose, I mean, it was hard to know what exactly was going to happen, what we were going to have to do. Was it going to be a full lockdown? Was it going to be a gradual one? Eventually, when the word came down, I think it was actually Basketball Ireland was one of the first sports to basically decide on a full shutdown. And we followed suit shortly after that and just advised all our clubs to shut down. It was a scary time, I think, for a lot of clubs, a lot of volunteers, and ourselves in the office in terms of knowing how long are we going to have to do this for, what's the way out. And as we know, we're still waiting for the way out. It's been a long time. It's been a lot longer than I would have anticipated back in March, I can tell you.
So at that time, what was the position with regards to the elite group, which would include Chloe, McGee?
So, I mean, we have 3 athletes who were competing for spots in the Olympics. So it was Chloe and Sam in the mixed doubles, and then Nat in the singles. And they'd been competing pretty much, as standard. A lot of travel. It was coming up to the end of the qualification period. Would have ended around end of April. They had a lot of tournaments left in their calendar. So it was a big shock, because slowly those all got cancelled or postponed. And we find ourselves now in the position where they've paused qualification period, and that's due to restart now in the new year. Hopefully, fingers crossed, that it can restart ahead of the Olympics. So it's been an extended period of, I suppose, uncertainty for the athletes. They were doing quite well. They were fairly close to qualifying. Sam and Chloe were, and Nat, if all things ended today, would have qualified. So it's just prolonged, I suppose, the wait for them. And, there was a significant amount of time there where they weren't able to train, which has obviously impacted them. Thankfully, thanks to Sport Ireland, I think in a large part, they were able to come back in June, and they've been able to train fairly continuously since June. But between March and June, they weren't able to train at all, which did have an impact.
So what about the glorious Dublin and District Leagues that we all know and love that occupy so many people over the winter? Did that finish out, or what was the story there?
No, a lot of the season didn't finish. We would normally run, obviously, our All-Ireland leagues, All-Ireland counties, all that. They were all postponed towards the end of this year. Of course, they've now subsequently been cancelled. But at the time, the branches worked really well with us in terms of trying to move things around. There was league matches that needed to be played across the country, county playoffs. And unfortunately, every time it started to look like we had an opportunity to maybe get those done, restrictions were reimposed or inter-county travel changed. There was just a lot of uncertainty, I think, in the early days of the lockdowns, and managing the different phases that were introduced subsequently later on. It became very difficult to really plan a consistent period of time where those games could be played. So unfortunately, last season sort of just ended without any fanfare, and there was a number of tournaments that have just been cancelled because we have we had nowhere to run them, and unfortunately we're running up against that problem now again in this current season.
So could you explain that? Because I know myself, for instance, I'm in Irish Town Stadium a lot, and it's it's shut and then it's open and it's shut, and the staff are there, and sometimes they're not there, and you can't get into the toilets, or weirdly, they closed off the parking, although we were allowed in, which all the went completely crazy over. So with the two facilities, which is Baldoyle and Terranure that I know about, plus all of Lisburn up north, what are the restrictions in using those facilities?
Well, the restrictions in the north have actually been, I think, almost slightly more severe for Lisburn. But if we're talking about, say, Terranure and Baldoyle, the initial restrictions, they were just shut down like everything else. But since that shutdown in March, there has never been a return to play for the sport. So there has been a return to training, where we did get a period of time where you could get back training. But you technically weren't able to play any matches. It was indoor training only. And if you look at the current regulations, it's singles, so individual training only. So what's that's meant for, badminton is, it's got a number of different categories. You've singles, you've doubles, but doubles is very popular. It's probably more popular than singles for a lot of our social players. And because they haven't been able to play doubles together, it's meant a lot of them just haven't come back yet. And obviously it's hard to run leagues and competitions when you can't have doubles or mixed doubles and just singles. And there has just been generally a bit of confusion around what's allowed and what isn't allowed. And we've had to go back and clarify things. And usually by the time things have been clarified, you're so far into a certain point where you just don't have the time, or, you're not even able to run these competitions under the restrictions that are there. So
with regards to the staffing, have you had people go?
No, thankfully not. And again, I'd have to thank Sport Ireland for their continued support in that. The way we're funded, we have funding from our memberships, which by the time the first lockdown was introduced, we had gathered. So the income loss we incurred in the initial period of the lockdown wasn't as severe as other sports. A lot of the summer sports were much heavier hit than us. And this time around, we're obviously not anticipating any affiliation income, and we've actually just extended everybody's membership up until November 2021, just to make sure that people are covered under our insurance and governance. In the event that, we're able to get back to play quite quickly, at least there's no administrative delay for people getting registered. We'll just carry them through. But Sport Ireland, through the government support, have had a lot of funding, and we've been luckily enough to be able to tap into some of that funding, which has kept our core funding requirements the same, even though we've lost a significant amount of money for affiliations. And that's meant that we've been able to keep staff on, which I was very keen to do.
Yeah. So in other countries, what's been going on in the badminton world?
Well, in the UK, it's largely similar, if not in some cases worse. And they've had various shutdowns, slight openings. And from talking to my colleagues in Badminton England Badminton England or Scotland or Wales, they've all had to make some tough decisions. But however, when you go into Europe, into Denmark, which is a country that's, you know, similar to Ireland in terms of its size and its climate, they have been able to keep the sport going. And at the moment, I think their numbers are very similar to ours. They can have up to 50 juveniles playing, because obviously there's a lot of science there to back up that the juvenile risk is a lot lower than, say, for adult badminton. And that's something I'm keen to promote in the new year. We're very conscious that a lot of our juveniles haven't been able to play in a large number of months, and our concern is that we will lose those juveniles to other sports, or that they'll simply just stop playing altogether.
Yeah, and what about schools? Is there anything going on, or what's the protocol for schools?
There is stuff in the schools, but my understanding is that's sort of through the Department of Education. So it's not so much we're governing it; it's through the schools themselves, and they have pods set up. So they do have PE. I believe it's an hour, no more than an hour, and it's within that school pod, that class pod. But we're hopeful that we can work with the sports expert group and the government to maybe expand on that and get that out, because if they're playing in the schools together, surely there can be an expansion out into clubs.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? So for the future, what about the sorely missed Irish Open this year? I presume that was cancelled.
It was. There was two big events that well, I mean, I hate to just pay attention to just the internationals, because a lot of different events run by a lot of different regions got knocked. But when we're looking at what we do at the office, we were set to run the European Para Championships. We had bid for that and got it, and we were to run it this year. That would have been in June. Obviously, that didn't take place, and that's been postponed now until next year. The Irish Open, of course, it's our flagship event. We love running it. We had run one last year for our 120th anniversary. This year is the first year since World War II it's not taken place, which is a huge, you know, it's a significant, I suppose it just goes to show you the severity of the times we're in. The Irish Open has never been not ran since then. So it was a hard decision to make, but ultimately it was the right decision to make. There was no way we could have had an international of that size in Dublin in November. It's unfortunate.
Which is a great event, which I enjoy every year, I have to say. But so for the future, just tell us exactly what is the qualification for the Olympics now? When does it end? And also, when do you see local competition coming back?
So on the Olympic qualification, the BWF have published a new calendar for 2021. I believe it's meant to start now again towards the end of February, which is where it would have stopped in 2020. And it will run up until the end of April. So there's a couple of tournaments there that we'll be targeting for both Sam and Chloe, but also for Nat. It's going to be tough for them. And I suppose there's still a large amount of uncertainty in terms of, you know, I mean, we can plan for these things and the World Federation can plan for these things. But, you know, this virus has proved more than once that it's very capable of destroying even the best laid plans. So it's very much a wait and see. But the plan is that they'll be training and competing in January, February, and then when the qualification tournaments start up, they'll be travelling to those, all going well. Domestically, I am optimistic that we'll be able to get some stuff off the ground around the summertime, but I think we won't see a return to the badminton season as we know it until next season, which is next September. We'd hope to run as many projects as we can to encourage a return to play, whether those are fun tournaments that we run in conjunction with the branches or some variation of tournaments we've ran before. But at this point, I mean, half the season has gone by and not a single tournament has taken place. The rest of the season is really out as we would know it normally. So it's going to be next September, I feel.
Right. Well, that's interesting news, and I'm sure it's pretty much the same for all the other indoor sports like volleyball and basketball, and table tennis, which we all know are very good recreational activities when you live in a climate like ours. all I can say to all my friends in badminton and to you, David, is the absolute best of luck. And I hope that the halls of Ireland will soon be swarming with badminton players and shuttlecocks in the very near future.
I hope so too, Lindy. Thank you.
Right, so that's David, and I hope it gave you an insight into how the smaller sports, of which I'm a member, sort of, in athletics and also in my other sport of orienteering. Right, with just a small technical problem here. Apart from the smaller sports being disrupted, as we well know, rugby was disrupted, but they managed to have their championships, as indeed was GAA with the All-Ireland. Commiserations to Mayo. Sorry, Frank. Frank here is from Mayo. Again, brave effort. And we have to applaud. I don't know how many years now. It's probably more years than I think.
Well, 3, I think, yeah.
Is it? I'd say it's more than 3, is it? Barry?
Nearly 10.
There you go.
Well, in Ireland, though.
In Ireland, Barry.
In Ireland, nearly 10, 2004, since the
Malahide, Janie. So what happened? What happened? The event that you organised yourself is at Inch, isn't it, in Kerry?
Yeah,
what happened?
It's on a beach. It's in Kerry, West Kerry, Inch Beach, and it's one of the only park runs that's actually fully on the sand. So as of whatever March the 15th or 14th or whatever, we typically have 40 to 50 people on average running down the beach on a Saturday morning, and we no longer can do that now.
What? I mean, I'm still getting emails from Parkrun. So how is Parkrun tackling this problem of having, I don't know, how many members are there in Ireland at this stage? I'm not sure.
Yes, there's actually over 250,000 Irish registered Parkrun people. And there are 100 events around the country. So it's very big. You know, I think it's the third most popular running. Obviously, I think is the third most popular sport in Ireland to do. But Parkrun is very high up in terms of the the membership and the number of registered members. So yeah, 100 events, 250,000 Irish people signed up to it. And there's also a junior park run. So every Saturday morning at 9:30, 100 of these 5K free timed runs or walks or jogs take place. And then for the juniors under 11, there's a shorter to a 3K
2K.
on Sundays.
2K. Well, it's 2K in my local Deer Park.
2K, yeah.
Yeah.
So look, there's a large amount of Irish people who really enjoy this. What I will say is we have great. I'm in touch with the Irish kind of parkrun manager and the CEO of Global Parkrun in the UK, and they've been like really working hard behind the scenes to get it back up and running. They commissioned a study with Canterbury University where they wanted somebody to look into the risks of outdoor transmission of the virus. And anyway, to cut a long story short, there has not been yet, in all the testing around the world, I don't think there has actually been a confirmed test of that somebody has been infected through outdoors transmission, which would sort of give the green light to almost every outdoor sport there is.
Yeah.
Now, the study also concluded by basically saying that while outdoor transmission seems to be very low risk, it's the traveling and the congregating and the meeting for the cups of tea and all the other things that human beings do are deemed to be the risk factors when it comes to doing something like parkrun. So it hasn't restarted, and one of the key reasons being is that due to the government levels, we haven't gone down below level 2, and the maximum number of outdoor people at level 2 is 200. Now, while that would allow the majority of park runs to restart, some of the park runs have up to 500, 600 some days. Marley Park, I'm sure you're familiar with. Anyway, because of these handful of park runs that get the bigger numbers, unfortunately it has closed down the restart of all of the park runs, because some running, and you can speak to Frank Greally in a minute, but some running events actually started back in July. I'm a member of the Irish Mountain Running Association as well, and we actually started back racing in the middle of July, and we're lucky enough to have races in August and September as well. But because Parkrun has the higher numbers of over 200, which I'm still not sure where the 200 actually came from in terms of an actual evidence-based number, because some of the park runs exceed the 200, we haven't been able to restart all of the park runs in Ireland for that reason. And when you have little West of Ireland runs on the beach with 40 or 50 people every Saturday morning, it makes it even harder that they can't restart,
Right. Well, the one of the great things about parkrun and mountain running in some ways is that they've, which of course is my own bias, is that they've fed athletes into conventional athletics. I'm in athletics my whole life, but parkrun has been one of the most positive things that's happened, because it has created a whole new group of people who are joining our clubs, and we now have 60,000 members in Athletics Ireland, and probably double that unofficially. We'd like you all to join if you're not members already. So Frank, I know that, I'm well aware, as Barry said, certainly the mountain running stop, start, and my own sport of orienteering, the same thing, or my related sport, sorry, because we're all in the same bag. But what exactly went on in athletics? Can you remember back to March? Did we have cross country? I can't even remember.
No, the big, I suppose, positive story out of the whole thing was that we managed to get the national championships, the senior. But to everybody involved, I suppose, in Irish athletics, and got a couple of really brilliant races as well, which I suppose sparked, the Sean Tobin and the finish of the men's 1500 in particular is one that'll stand out, as an event. But since then, there hasn't been really an opportunity. Particularly, there's nothing happened really on the indoors. And again, I know where Barry is talking there about it may not necessarily be the whole indoors may not be the real story. It's the travelling to and from. I think has a lot to do with it as well. That some of the reasons they're giving us anyway. Of course, Parkrun has a great social dimension as well,
and the Business House Athletic Association. Let us not forget.
Has had all of that. And it's very hard on athletes. Athletes need targets, and they need to be. Training is one thing, but to have a target that you can race as well. Now, I have seen, and I think Barry alluded to it there as well. I have seen groups out on Saturday mornings from clubs and individuals. I was going to something the other morning at 6:45, and down near Santry, I met 10 people running out along the road at that stage of the morning. So people are getting out, and in fairness, they were spaced out well and everything. So I'm sure there's a case to be made. Well, and maybe talking there on the badminton front as well. Maybe we need more consistency of message as well. The message coming out maybe across the line. There does tend to be a bit of overlaps and confusion going on.
Do you mean from government or from us in the sports?
From government mostly. Yeah, I think there needs to be a little bit more clarity and consistency because you are seeing that groups of runners are getting out running. We have seen training sessions on tracks and time trials on tracks and stuff like that. And as he put it as well, the outdoors, there isn't any big significant data as far as I can see it anyway that there's much transmission outside. when you're outside competing. Indoors, I think indoors is different. It depends on everything, ventilation. That's what we're being told anyway.
Well, the ventilation in certain indoor venues in this country, I wouldn't like anyway, to be honest. But I think the other thing we have to remember is that in these very, very difficult times, being able to go out for a run for all of us, even without races, has really saved our sanity.
Well, I think it has, and I think that's one of the missing messages that's out there at the moment is that people need to be given a little bit of hope and told how to, given a bit of good information, how to boost your immune system, how to get out there in a positive mental attitude as well, and maybe a gratitude attitude type of way. That there's a lot we still have. We're talking out there that we're in difficult times now. We haven't a clue what difficult times are. If we look back, our ancestors came through famine, they came through war, they came through rationing, they came through Spanish flu, they came through mass immigration and immigration. So we haven't suffered at all, really, when it comes down to it,
Well, it's not only that, but I'm going to criticise my fellow journalists here, that when this all started, I looked into the history of viruses and viral diseases and disease generally. And one of the things that really, really struck me, as I'm sure Barry, I'm going to bring you in a second on this, Barry, is that our longevity has improved incredibly over, let's say, I was looking at 30 years, but it's nearly in the last 10 years. And at the moment, what they're not emphasising is nobody extra is dying. The big worry, of course, is that people will die, not of COVID, but of the cancers that are being missed, the heart attacks that they're afraid to go into hospital to have treated, the strokes, the dementia, mental illness. I mean, and as we're saying, sport is one of the things that can actually, it's playtime for adults, let's face it. We all need to play.
It is, and as the legendary George Sheehan often said, you need to find your bliss, and bliss is within running. But, we have another probably equally alarming thing coming down the tracks at fair rapid speed at the moment. And if we don't have our children, and I work a lot, as you know, in bringing the Daily Mile into primary schools, if we don't continue to get the children out exercising, we are going to have one heck of a problem in child obesity. 20 to 25% of our children today, it's been established, 20 to 25 between 3 and 5 year old are already showing overweight and obesity. So that is that you were saying there about people getting strokes and everything. Our children, if we're not very careful, a big segment of them, a very significant segment of our children, will be picking up the diseases now that people in their 60s, 70s and 80s, they'll be getting them in their 20s and 30s. Now that is alarming. And if we shut down too much on things like exercise, we have over 1,000 schools now signed up to the Daily Mile, and without exception, teachers, principals, parents are coming back saying it makes a big difference that the kids get out and run in a safe way. And during the lockdown, they managed to keep going as well.
Yes.
And loads of parents kept the Daily Mile at home going. And the Daily Mile is only one small program. There are so many other areas, but children need to be encouraged, because we have a couple of things. We have the scare, as I see it, of this obesity coming down, but we also have the addiction to mobile phones, to technology, and that's, if you have the two of them running parallel, and we keep shutting down exercise and the ability to get outdoors and do it, I think we're coming down a very dangerous track as well.
I agree. Barry, you have something to say there?
Yeah, just to back up what you're saying there in terms of kind of obviously overall general health, physical health, as well as mental health. I mean, one of the reasons why Parkrun was set up was to cater for the non-athletes. In other words, it's not kind of to cater for the competitive athletes. It's actually to cater for people who typically wouldn't turn up for a local race on a Saturday morning. And like I said, it's really gained a huge following of people who would not normally have seen themselves going down to their local park to go for a run. Even at my own local one here, I mean, I've got people who are kind of recovering from serious illnesses, coming out of hospital. I've got, all different shapes and sizes of people who, some of them walk, some of them are very elderly. In other words, it's actually brought a large proportion of the Irish population out to do exercise on a Saturday morning that they typically would probably not have done, because it's so relaxed, it's so easy to do, and it's got a huge social element to it as well. I mean, the volunteering aspect of Parkrun is almost as big as the participation of running in Parkrun. The volunteers have, they're kind of like a big family, and in the situation that we're in, for people not to be allowed to do something that is physically and mentally healthy for them is like one of the main strong words that I've been using since the start about this is disproportionate. If you look through pretty much all of the measures that we're having to follow, pretty much every single one of them is disproportionate. And being allowed to go into Penny's with 200 other people, or even go into a local restaurant now that for your last meal before they close, and there's 50 or 60 people sitting down indoors. If people are allowed to do those things in essentially large groups, it's completely disproportionate that people are not being able to do something that is physically and mentally good for them in the outdoors, where there is basically no possible transmission. So I think it highlights, and I could go in very deep into all of this now, but I think something like stopping a sport, particularly an outdoor sport, but something like Parkrun that is for, let's call it the general public as opposed to the competitive athletes. I think it shows how wrong and how irrational and how illogical a lot of these measures are, and like people really have to start, who are involved in sports like this and are really physically, like, they've done a survey on Parkrun members, and it's like 60% of people have said that it's detrimentally affecting their mental health. And a really sad statistic is that 42% of juniors are saying that it affects their happiness and their mental health.
Sorry, Barry, do you mean people who already do Parkrun and they're affected?
Yeah, so people who are they've sent out surveys, back in October, I think it was, and they asked, I think it was 1,800. No, anyway, there was a couple of hundred members that had filled out the surveys and replied, and out of that survey, they found that 60% of those Parkrun members are missing, their mental health is detrimentally affected because they are not being able to do the Parkrun every Saturday morning.
But isn't that absolutely awful? I mean, the people who are getting out to run anyway are the better end. So it makes you really wonder how the rest of the population is coping.
Totally. So, I mean, it is a prime example. And like, look, we could talk about every other sport, but again, another disproportionate happening in Ireland is that GAA restarted back in July, which is a full contact sport, which I'm delighted that I want all the sports to restart. But how can a full contact sport restart if a local run in the park can't start? I mean, so you can go through a lot of these comparisons in terms of the measures, and like I said, the word disproportionate just keeps on coming up all the time.
Yeah. And it's in danger of creating division as well, because it is lovely to watch the All-Ireland football and hurling finals and that, but then people are denied in the smaller sports, and I suppose that's a difficult one as well. And I can see what Barry is talking about there, about people missing the park run, because I think the park run as well has done a huge amount to encourage community, to bring us back in communities, small communities again, something that we were, losing, I think, and the same with the road races and everything else. Difficult, I suppose, for a lot of road races to be justified now with, a couple of thousand people and that, but I think one of the good things, in a strange way, is the virtual runs have done a little bit of good, I suppose, in some ways. I know that We had the Remembrance Run, now we had nearly 6,000 people, where you have a definite focus on a definite idea, and people were going out in their own local areas and they were running and walking. It's not the same thing, obviously, as being able to get out into the park.
Well, I think it's, I heard, because I do the fixtures for the Irish Runner Annual and so on, and to see that races way into the future are not opting to even try to put on races. I have to say this, and I'm sorry to say this to my friends in athletics, I think some of you are bottling it. I honestly think that race directors should try and put on something. For instance, and I'm sorry, Jim Ockney and the Dublin Marathon people, you should have put on some kind of marathon. And I don't know whose decision it was. Possibly sponsors influenced it. I really don't know. But I admire the race organisers, particularly in the north of Ireland, and our friends from My Run Results and what's the other one? Sorry, I'm going to be in trouble now. The race directors, or the people who are professional race organisers, have actually put on races and made an effort. And I honestly do think that too many clubs have slightly bottled it. Come on, clubs, put on races.
Yeah.
You may be restricted, but...
Lindy, but the fact that there have been races on already, like during the summer, I've done 5K local road races with 80 people in them.
Right.
I've competed in the Irish mountain running races. There's 100 of us running. All of these running events that have already taken place, there has been no contact tracing, or nothing has been linked to any of these events. So it's not like, I could see why people back in May were very hesitant, because no one wanted to kind of be the first to try something out and then get targeted because a positive case was found from their race. But there have been many, actually, I don't know the actual number, but there have been lots of road races and mountain running races. I think there's been triathlons and Ironman. So we actually have our own empirical data from the last few months where races in the outdoors of a non-contact sport are not going to cause any problems. So, I mean, race organizers now, like you said, I think they've bottled it, but now they just have very little courage if they are not prepared to now put them on, because we've already put races on without there being any issues whatsoever. So that almost should be the green light to continue and continue to put more races on. So this is the only way we're going to get out of this, if people start kind of taking action and making things happen. Because if the time for sitting back and waiting for something to happen, as we can all see, is over, because they keep on. There's a delay tactic here going on, and they keep pushing things out. So we have to kind of now step up, and we have to start steering the ship slightly if we can.
It's very hard, I suppose, for runners, regular runners who are used to being able to get out and run with a certain freedom, to watch what you could nearly call a stampede up Grafton Street, and when the shops open. So there's a lot of contradictions.
Well, this is exactly what we're saying, and it's pop-up races. My friends in pop-up races.
Yeah, they're doing a great job.
So My Run Results in pop-up races and Championship Ireland.
Yeah.
Fair play to you.
Yeah,
for what you're doing.
Very well, and I think Pop-Up have done some races in Mondello within a controlled area in a controlled way as well.
That's what Championship in the North is doing. They're out down on a race course.
Yeah, and My Run Results had Ron and Wogan and people like that. They have done their level best to keep some sort of equilibrium going.
It's very. I feel though that one of the big problems is that certain sports have way too much lobbying power, and us in the smaller sports we just don't. And I wonder, is there any way? Do you know what? I don't even know the name of the Minister for Sport. I own up. I admit. Is there anything we can do to try and persuade those in power? I can't call them leaders because they're not. That all the sports are different and have different needs and do not need to be put in the same box. What do you reckon? Have we any power of lobbying?
Well, I think running, just simple running and fitness walking and that, I think, You know, you go down to St. Anne's Park in Raheny or the Phoenix Park on a Sunday, and there are hundreds of people out participating, and you know, and they're not hugely social distance, but they're being respectfully. And I think you have to put a bit of trust in people as well. I'd love to see, for instance, and I've said it a few times, that even where we'd have events and you have the simple things we used to see long ago, a couple of loudspeakers, encouraging people just to be mindful of each other, mindful of what they're doing. We don't get any sort of things broadcast at all like that publicly. I haven't seen any public broadcasts at all. Just quiet messages of encouragement to people rather than stamping down all the time. And if we were getting that, you know, it worked when they were going around promoting elections long ago. It worked for the circus when the circus was coming to town. People listen, but we have such a saturation now of social media that messages, I think, get lost a lot along the way. Nothing like bringing the message to the people, I think, you know. And I think the people will respect you if you do that. And then you could have a lot more a safer environment, I think, that way.
Well, one of the strangest things I've noticed, and I'll probably get criticised for saying this as well, is that Russia Today has become my source of news, because there's some interesting things. You know, the mainstream media, let's face it, is failing us miserably in this. Indeed, in sport, like they don't cover the smaller sports, they don't promote what we're saying here. But Russia Today, what's really interesting in Russia is the only country that seems to be saying to its people, you know, we're nearly out of this, we're nearly there, a few more weeks. In other words, the encouraging words, rather than screaming at us that, oh God, woe is me, and it's going to be another 4 months and we haven't a clue. And as you were saying off camera earlier, Frank, that people really opt out when they're just getting negative messages all the time.
If you get a saturation of negative messages, and I don't know about you, or I don't know about Barry, but I have in the last couple of months heard directly from friends of mine of 5 people between the ages of 15 and 50 who have committed suicide. And I believe we're pushing that down. We're not bringing that out to at least talk about it. And we are always saying that you should talk about things. We seem to be flattening that down. We've had an awful lot of suicides through this whole lockdown.
Well, I think...
I know 5, and I know of 5 people. That's an awful lot of people that I know directly. I didn't know the people themselves, but I knew of relatives, and I knew of... And in different parts of the country as well.
And Frank, is that more than you know of people who have passed away from COVID?
Oh, yeah.
But there's also the elderly people in nursing homes that are losing the will to live because they're incarcerated. It's the only word for it.
And their relatives are suffering.
Exactly.
Yeah, and frustrated. I'd love to see a lot more consistency because we seem to be stabbing at a lot of things without really resolving them.
It's actually, we're getting into deep waters here. It's rural life. I don't know, what's it like down in Kerry, Barry? I mean...
Well, look, Kerry has been one of the counties with one of the lowest amount of cases, or, you know, 14-day incident rates and all that. If you actually look at the numbers now, which actually brings to the question of the blanket recommendations that now NPHET are giving us. Kerry has got, you know, a similar 14-day incident rate, or, you know, it's under this 100 target, which would be a lockdown level 2 or level 3 if we went by the way they treated Offaly and Kildare back in August. So and if you look at many other counties like Leitrim, and I think Wexford is pretty good as well, their case numbers are very low, and obviously we know Dublin and Donegal will be some of the higher counties. So to be blanketing all of, in fact, most of Munster is pretty low compared to even the 4 other provinces. But the fact that we're now getting blanket lockdowns, as opposed to the proposed localized version that they were going to do, again goes back to the disproportionate word. So yeah, look, Kerry should be basically back to full throttle, to be honest with you. If you look at case numbers, hospital numbers, I think the University Hospital Kerry has only 1 or 2 COVID patients in it. So it feels like a kind of a sci-fi movie to live in, where you're being asked to follow all these rules and yellow tape everywhere, and everyone going around with masks on, not being able to do your sport, not being able to, have a wedding and all these kind of things. And you're in a place like Kerry, where it's virtually unchanged in terms of the severity of this virus since March. I mean, it's really surreal to actually live in a place that's been very unaffected, but yet is still in it,
Well, I checked the HPSC, which I applaud them for their recording of. If you really dig down and look into the detail there, you realise. I mean, this is one of the reasons I haven't been worried from day one, because I looked at the statistics and I realised that the only people that really are threatened are people whose health is already compromised. And as one wise, I'll give you the data, or the data now. Exactly 148 people of 2,100 or something, that's the date they have with a connection to COVID. But only 148 of those have no underlying clinical condition. And what I like with HPSC is that they go back and examine it. That figure has actually dropped. Mm-hmm. That they're clearly keeping they know how many people have actually died, that they can't account for anything else. But so that's one of the things that's really frustrating. But I don't know how we're going to get out of that one. The other interesting point that I came across today was a doctor saying that in the past, if you said to somebody, "I'm really sorry to tell you you've got the flu," you'd go, "Oh, well, a couple of weeks in bed." Whereas when they tell people they've COVID, they think they're going to die. I mean, what's going on?
I think you have to give people hope, and I think if you certainly a lot of stuff that it probably is for very good reasons and everything, but if you cut off hope, you're going to have a whole avalanche of other problems, and all the undiagnosed cancers now that have and the people that can't get into hospitals for other reasons. We had a fairly buckled health system before this ever started, and it must be in very bad shape at other ends that we don't even realise at the moment, because every single focus now is on COVID.
Well, the big problem, people are saying, "Oh, what's going on in the north of Ireland?" And there was that notorious picture of ambulances. The reasons the ambulances were backed up was because until you have taken a COVID test and got the result, they will not admit you to hospital. So all we can say here is, if you're sick, if you have anything wrong with you, please go to hospital. There's nothing to fear there. There really isn't. The doctors and the nurses are superb, as they've always been. The big problem is the outer shell of the chestnut, as a friend of mine says, which is hard, bristly, and very difficult for all of us to penetrate. So, the real worry is
there on what Frank was saying there, Lindy. The way to deliver hope is by giving people the right information. I mean, there was a quote there from a guy called Dr. Scott Atlas, who is probably what I consider one of the best public health experts over in the States. And he's written an article called What We Have is a Pandemic of Misinformation. If you give Irish people the correct information, and the key bits would be things like the infection fatality rate, and how similar COVID's infection fatality rate is to a severe influenza or flu season. If people start just simply knowing those things, giving them the reference, which there is a reference for, or trying to explain that the PCR test is under investigation for being flawed, and there is a massive paper after being submitted by 22 scientists that have outlined 10 individual flaws in the PCR test, which essentially makes it invalid and unsuitable. And if you show them things like excess deaths from previous years, because we have forgotten that people die every day in Ireland and from various diseases. And if you simply show them that on average 9,000 people a year die from cancer, and that the 2018 excess mortality, which I think I need to double check, is similar to 2020 excess mortality. If you simply get people to kind of, if you deliver that kind of right information to people, then they will have hope. Because if you listen to the radio and watch the TV every day, you don't get that right information. And what the frustrating thing about it is now is you don't have to dig too far for that information now. I mean, you can even go to the Irish government website, the GeoHive COVID-19 Ireland GeoHive website, and look at the graphs of deaths and ICUs and cases. And you'll see cases have gone up in October, and they're going up again now. But there's a flat line of deaths and a stable, very low number of ICU beds. I think it's 28. Yeah. I still can't understand why and how. I guess I can understand, because we're being, it's a fear-mongering campaign that is going on at the moment, and their own data, like without even getting into PCR tests and stuff like that, but even our own data on a government website would not support or justify this next current lockdown that we're being asked to go into. So,
I think as well that there's a very much a lack of any type of spiritual leadership, in the sense that we need some, and again, that's where hope comes into it. We're very much in danger of coming into a real spiritual vacuum in a lot of ways, I think, and I'm not talking of Catholic Church or anything like that. I think it's the pure spiritual look at the world and at the communities and everything. It seems to be all just on shutdowns and very little about the mental condition, and that comes back to a level of treating the spirit right as well. And if we don't treat the spirit right, well, the spirit will break down.
Well, but of course, the great hope is the vaccines, which I keep pointing out to people. Most viruses last for about 6 weeks. So why they think that mass vaccination is a good idea is utterly beyond me. But we won't go into that, because we're trying to be positive tonight with Christmas coming up. I personally found the news today of another lockdown nearly the straw that broke. I hope it is the straw that breaks the camel's back and all our backs, that we just suddenly realise that these people have no right to do this to us. We're sociable animals. It's how we function. What makes us happy, like going out and running, like gardening, all these very positive, as you're saying, Frank, I think we just need to be connecting with our world again. And they're not letting us connect with what we are.
Connecting and encouraging rather than pushing down. And I think we brought it up as well already, that if you do treat people in that way, they'll come with you. There's a lot of division out there in society at the moment, and you can feel it not alone.
Yeah.
And you can see it, and you can see it in the traffic, and see it, the impatience in people. People are very much coiled like springs at the moment, and that will bring its own massive problems as well. So we'll create more trust, and you do that by living with people, and I think by encouraging them, and by giving them that little light of hope. Because if you lose the light of hope, we all know in our own lives, if you lose that, and there's a lot of people out there losing that very rapidly at the moment, I think, anyway.
I agree. Have you we're nearly going to wrap up now, so have you anything final to say, Barry?
Well, look, I've been, a concerned citizen since the very start of this. Apart from, organising something like Parkrun, my background is chemistry and, sports science. So I've been looking at this in depth, and I'm at a stage now where basically I see science has been vandalized, and all we've received is misinformation and a misrepresentation of the facts. I would ask anyone who's on the fence, or anyone who's really kind of still questioning what's going on. The correct information is there. You simply go and look up a WHO paper by John Ioannidis. Go to the Fat Emperor, Ivor Cummings is his name. Go to his website page, and you'll see 22 papers related to lockdowns not being effective. And then look at the issue with the PCR test, go to the Cremain-Drosden report, and just, you need to decide for yourself what is correct, what is right and what is wrong, because what we're being told does not tally up with what the actual factual data is. So it's up to the people now to kind of find out for themselves and make up their own decision, because this doesn't look like it's getting any better. So we have to start to, in inverted commas, come together ourselves, because we're being led down a garden path, it seems to be. And what we have to do is find out what the right information is. And like I said, the right information is there. We need to start coming together as, sports groups, whether you're a runner, whether you're a cyclist, whether you're a badminton player. And, you have to start really lobbying and start really challenging why your sport is not being allowed to play again, when other sports like GAA are going on, and when 50 or 60 people can sit inside for 2 hours with food and drinks. Why can't doubles play badminton, and why can't 40 or 50 people run around the park on a Saturday morning? So that's where I would leave it, without going into any more detail. Like, find out for yourself, get the right information, and then start questioning things. This is a great show. The 2 words, we're looking at health and we're looking for debate. So that's what we need to start doing now. Instead of a lot of people, I think, have kept their heads in the sand for whatever reason. We really need to start actually standing up now and just following the right path and using the just and correct information.
I think we need to be careful, and we need to care for each other
and be strong.
Yeah, I
Right.
think that's part that hits it, I think. Yeah.
So the sad reality is you will not get any of this information, as we've said, in the mainstream media. We think we're doing a good job. This programme is brought to you by a group of volunteers, mostly from Health Freedom Ireland and the Irish Inquiry. We would like to thank, this is our 7th programme and probably the last one of this year. We'd like to thank our production team. That's Stephen, Sarah, who isn't here, Danny on the cameras, Peter on the sound. Our 2 guests today, thank you very much. The guests we've had in the last few weeks who've been absolutely brilliant. And let's stay strong and aux armes, as they say in French. Good night and happy Christmas.